The galaxy trembled under her voice. I challenge the strongest human to a duel. The Galactic Empress's voice thundered across every screen, broadcast in over 1,000 languages. The towering figure clad in shimmering armor glared down at Earth's leaders. If your champion fails, your planet will burn. Earth's leaders froze in panic. News stations looped the broadcast non-stop. Every military expert scrambled to identify a worthy champion. Elite soldiers, world-class martial artists, and Olympic champions were considered, but none seemed prepared to face the undefeated conqueror who had crushed countless planets. Fear swallowed the globe whole. Meanwhile, Charlie Wilkins lounged in his cluttered apartment, scrolling through his phone with one hand and munching on a stale bag of chips with the other. His eyes barely blinked at the countless headlines about the Empress's challenge. To Charlie, galactic drama had no place in his simple life, at least until his phone buzzed. Dude! You're trending! A friend texted, followed by a link. Curious, Charlie clicked. His blood drained from his face as he saw the headline. Earth's greatest warrior found? The video was a montage of Charlie dominating galactic gladiators, a VR game modeled after the Empress's combat style. In the footage, Charlie executed impossible dodges, wild counters, and clever maneuvers, moves no soldier dared attempt. He'd accidentally posted the video last week as a joke. Now, with no official champion declared, Earth's desperate population had decided he was their best shot. Charlie barely had time to react before agents pounded on his door. You've been drafted, one of them barked. The next few days were a blur. Charlie found himself whisked to military headquarters where officials tried to mold him into a warrior. They failed miserably. He had zero athletic ability, and his attempts to wield a plasma blade ended with scorched walls and shattered windows. A combat robot malfunctioned during training, shouting insults like, "Error! Target too pathetic to hit!" as it chased him down the hall. Soldiers sneered at him, whispering about Earth's inevitable doom. Charlie's morale sank deeper each day. The night before the duel, Charlie sat alone in his room, staring at the sleek, polished armor laid out before him. He didn't belong here. He was a game developer, not a warrior. His mind drifted to his mom, who always believed in him even when no one else did. He remembered the day she framed one of his childhood drawings, a stick-figure hero defeating an evil queen. "You've always been clever," she had said. "That's your power." The next morning, Charlie stepped into the Colosseum. The air buzzed with energy as thousands of alien spectators roared from their seats. Towering holographic displays showed his face next to the Empress's, making the contrast painfully clear. She looked like a goddess of war, and he looked like a man desperately wishing he were anywhere else. The Empress stepped forward, her crimson cloak trailing behind her like blood. Her smirk curled like a predator's. "I expected more," she said. "I'll make this quick." The gong sounded, and she struck like lightning. Charlie barely dodged, more by accident than skill. His panicked stumble was mistaken for expert footwork by the crowd, who cheered wildly. The Empress paused, momentarily confused. Charlie's mind raced. The Empress's movements, they followed the exact pattern of the Galactic Gladiator's boss fight. He knew her combat style better than anyone. A half-baked plan formed in his mind. When she lunged again, Charlie sidestepped and tripped, not deliberately, but the timing was perfect. The Empress's plasma lance struck the arena floor, sending sparks into the air. Charlie awkwardly rolled away. The crowd went wild. For the next few minutes, Charlie improvised. Each dodge, stumble, and flailing counter looked like strategic brilliance. The Empress's rage intensified. She unleashed a series of devastating attacks, each one mimicked the game's boss's pattern. Charlie countered with moves inspired by in-game exploits, fake-out dodges, awkward spins, and sudden lunges that appeared unpredictable. To onlookers, it seemed like Earth's champion was a combat genius. In reality, Charlie was operating on caffeine, panic, and dumb luck. But luck could only last so long. The Empress shifted her stance, a move Charlie didn't recognize from the game. A new technique. She conjured a swirling energy construct that lashed out like a living whip. Charlie dove but felt a searing pain across his shoulder. He hit the ground hard, gasping. "You're finished," the Empress sneered. She raised her plasma lance, its tip glowing white-hot. Charlie's mind raced. If she changed tactics, his game-based strategies wouldn't be enough. He remembered something, a notorious Galactic Gladiator's glitch. If timed perfectly, players could exploit a bug that caused the boss to attack its own minions. It was stupid. It was insane. It was his only chance. As the Empress thrust her lance, Charlie flailed his arms wildly, mimicking the broken animations from the game's glitch. The Empress blinked in confusion. Her energy construct, confused by her own magic's shifting pattern, swung too early, directly into her armor. The impact shattered part of her defense and sent her stumbling back. The crowd erupted. Charlie couldn't believe it worked. Furious, the Empress clenched her fists. The arena floor trembled as she summoned a vortex of energy. "I will burn your world!" she roared. In her rage, she lost focus. Charlie spotted her exposed wrist, a weak point he'd exploited countless times in the game. Channeling every ounce of courage, he lunged forward and jabbed his weapon directly into the weak spot. Sparks erupted, and the Empress staggered backward, her power flickering out. For a breathless moment, the arena fell silent. Then, thunderous applause. Aliens cheered, chanting Charlie's name. The Empress staggered to her feet, clutching her injured arm. She glared at Charlie but smiled. "Perhaps humanity is stronger than I thought," she muttered before vanishing in a burst of crimson light. Charlie stood frozen as cameras zoomed in on his bewildered face. His face appeared on every screen across the galaxy. The commentator's voice echoed in disbelief. "Earth's champion has won." Days later, Charlie returned home a hero. News anchors hailed him as Earth's greatest warrior, but in truth, Charlie knew better. He'd won not with strength, but with creativity, improvisation, and just a little bit of luck. His mom's voice played in his head again. "You've always been clever." Maybe that was all he ever needed to be. The Colosseum's towering gates opened once more, and Charlie felt his stomach twist into knots. The victory over the Empress was still fresh in his mind, but this wasn't over yet. He knew that much. The Empress may have acknowledged his win, but the tension in her voice during her parting words didn't sit well with him. Something about the way she smirked, as if she knew something he didn't, gnawed at him. Charlie's victory had been part skill, part luck, but mostly madness, and that madness couldn't last forever. His footsteps echoed on the metallic platform as he walked toward the preparation room. The walls hummed faintly with power, and digital screens flickered overhead showing highlights from his so-called legendary performance. Clips of him tripping, stumbling, and flailing were broadcast as heroic maneuvers. Reporters hailed him as a master tactician, and Earth's people now called him their greatest warrior. Charlie knew better. He was a guy who played too many video games and had no business being here. Unfortunately, the galaxy didn't seem to care. 2 heavily armored guards escorted him to the armory, where an attendant scanned him with a glowing device. The man's eyes widened when the results appeared. "Strange," the attendant muttered. "Your adrenaline levels are still through the roof." "Yeah," Charlie muttered. "That's called panic." Moments later, he stood in front of his armor, a sleek, reinforced suit that looked like something out of a sci-fi action movie. Charlie had grown accustomed to the bulky gear, but that didn't make it any easier to wear. As he tightened the straps and checked his wrist-mounted interface, a booming voice echoed down the hallway. "You survived by accident," the voice growled. Charlie turned to see a towering warrior, clad in obsidian armor with glowing red lines etched across its surface. The man's face was scarred, his one good eye burning with contempt. "You're no champion," the man spat. "The Empress will break you next time." Charlie tried to smile, but his face refused to cooperate. "Yeah," he said dryly. "I've heard that before." The warrior chuckled darkly. "You don't understand what's coming. The Empress never truly loses. The next duel won't be a show for the crowd. She'll humiliate you, tear you apart, and make Earth beg for mercy. The man's words stuck with Charlie as he walked down the dimly lit corridor to the arena. The air seemed heavier than before. The crowd's cheers weren't as enthusiastic, more curious than celebratory. Rumors had spread that the Empress hadn't been serious in their last encounter, and now everyone was waiting to see what would happen when she fought with her true power. When Charlie stepped into the arena, he felt the weight of thousands of eyes bearing down on him. The Empress stood at the far end of the battlefield, her crimson armor gleaming beneath the artificial sunlight. She held her plasma lance at her side, its blade pulsing with heat. Her expression was calm, too calm. "I admit," the Empress said, her voice carrying effortlessly through the stadium. "You surprised me." She began to walk forward, each step deliberate and precise. "But your victory wasn't skill. It was luck. And luck has a nasty habit of running out." Charlie swallowed hard and readied himself. The gong sounded, and the Empress exploded into motion. Her speed was terrifying. She closed the distance in seconds, her plasma lance flashing through the air. Charlie barely dodged the first strike, but the second caught his arm, searing his armor and sending sparks into the air. He stumbled back, narrowly avoiding a downward slash that cracked the arena floor beneath him. Desperation surged through Charlie's mind. He tried to rely on the strategies he remembered from Galactic gladiators, but the Empress wasn't following the same pattern anymore. Her movements were sharper, unpredictable, like she'd been holding back before. His tricks weren't working. Charlie threw himself backward, narrowly dodging another strike. His breath came in ragged gasps. His limbs screamed from the strain of dodging, and sweat poured down his face. He needed something, anything, to slow her down. Suddenly, an idea sparked. Charlie remembered one of the game's infamous glitches, a movement exploit where rapid spinning confused the AI-controlled boss. It was ridiculous, but desperate times called for desperate measures. He twisted his body in an awkward spin, flailing his arms like a malfunctioning robot. The Empress hesitated, momentarily caught off guard by the absurd display. Charlie capitalized on her confusion, lunging forward and knocking her off balance. For a second, the crowd erupted in laughter. The Empress's face twisted with rage, and she lashed out with a powerful shockwave of energy. The blast struck Charlie square in the chest, sending him skidding across the arena floor. His vision blurred, and the air burned in his lungs. "You're nothing but a fool," the Empress sneered, advancing once again. "A fraud playing warrior." Charlie coughed, forcing himself to his feet. "Yeah," he wheezed. "But I'm winning, aren't I?" The Empress snarled and unleashed a volley of rapid strikes. Charlie dodged desperately, barely surviving the onslaught. His mind raced. The game's strategies were useless now. She was fighting like something he'd never seen before. He needed something new. Then it hit him. The Empress was predictable, not because of her patterns, but because of her pride. She hated being embarrassed. The spin had worked not because it was clever, but because it had humiliated her. That was the key. Charlie feigned another stumble, pretending to trip over his own feet. The Empress rushed forward, her weapon glowing with deadly energy. At the last second, Charlie sidestepped and kicked a loose piece of debris directly into her shin. The Empress stumbled and face-planted into the arena floor. The crowd erupted in chaotic laughter. The Empress's eyes blazed with fury as she rose to her feet, her energy flaring wildly. "You think this is a joke?" she roared. Charlie grinned weakly. "No," he said, "but I'm getting pretty good at surviving one." The Empress unleashed her full power, her plasma lance transforming into a crackling spear of pure energy. Charlie barely dodged her furious strikes, each one leaving scorched trails across the arena floor. His armor's warning sensors blared in his ears. He was out of time. As the Empress lunged for the final blow, Charlie remembered the old glitch sequence, the one that caused the game's AI to glitch out if you performed a precise series of steps. He had no idea if it would work in real life, but it was all he had left. He ducked low, spun twice, and then jumped with his arms flailing wildly. The Empress lunged, and stumbled mid-attack. Her weapon flickered, the energy sparking violently before vanishing. The sudden misfire sent her sprawling across the floor. For a heartbeat, the arena fell silent. Then the crowd erupted in applause, cheering louder than before. The Empress staggered to her feet, her face flushed with anger and frustration. For a moment, it seemed like she might lash out again, but then her expression softened. "You're insane," she muttered. "But effective." The atmosphere aboard the Empress's warship was suffocating. Charlie sat alone in a sleek metal chamber, staring at the cold steel walls. The excitement of his so-called victories had worn off, replaced by a nagging sense of dread. He knew the Empress hadn't invited him aboard her ship out of kindness or admiration. Something deeper was at play, something dangerous. Moments later, the door hissed open, and 2 guards motioned for him to follow. Charlie reluctantly stood and walked down the narrow corridor, passing by alien soldiers who shot him either glares of contempt or murmurs of curiosity. They knew the Empress didn't lose, at least, not genuinely, and Charlie's victories had painted him as a wild card. The unsettling part was that Charlie wasn't even sure how much of it had been skill or just dumb luck. The guards led him to a vast throne room, its walls shimmering with shifting holograms of conquered planets. The Empress sat upon her throne, her crimson armor gleaming in the dim light. Her expression was unreadable, her gaze cold yet oddly calm. "I've been thinking about you," the Empress said without looking at him. "Your victories, unexpected, but not impossible. You aren't strong. You aren't skilled. But you are unpredictable." Her eyes narrowed. "I don't like unpredictability." Charlie swallowed hard. "Yeah, well, unpredictability is kinda my thing." The Empress stood and walked toward him, her armor softly humming with energy. "You're not just lucky," she said. "I watched the recordings of your matches. You knew things you shouldn't have. Moves that mirrored the strategies of a figure lost to history, the Lost Queen." Charlie's brow furrowed. "The Lost Queen? Isn't that some old myth from the game?" He tried to play it off, but his curiosity sparked. The Lost Queen had been a mysterious, unused boss character in Galactic Gladiators, one that had been patched out due to a game-breaking glitch. Players speculated she was meant to be stronger than the Empress herself, but her role had been buried in obscure lore. The Empress stared at him for a long moment before speaking. "The Lost Queen was real. A warrior unlike any other, my sister." Charlie's heart skipped a beat. "Wait, you're telling me a video game glitch is actually real?" "The game," the Empress said, "was no accident. Long ago, Earth's technology intercepted battle data from our empire and unknowingly translated it into entertainment. The strategies, the characters, even my own combat style, it's all based on real events." Charlie's mind reeled. That meant his so-called skills had been less about clever gameplay and more about him exploiting patterns based on real war tactics. His panic deepened. If the Lost Queen had been a real warrior, and Charlie had unknowingly mirrored her strategies, that meant he had unknowingly invoked the Empress's most dangerous rival. "The Lost Queen was a threat to my empire," the Empress continued. "I defeated her and sealed her power away in an artifact known as the Heart of the Cosmos, a device powerful enough to bend the laws of reality itself." Charlie's eyes widened. "And let me guess, you want me to find it?" The Empress smiled coldly. "Exactly." Moments later, Charlie found himself inside a high-speed shuttle, accompanied by a group of alien soldiers. The Empress's voice crackled through a communicator, instructing him to infiltrate an ancient ruin hidden deep beneath a frozen moon's surface. The artifact was buried there, protected by powerful traps and constructs designed by the Lost Queen herself. When the shuttle landed, Charlie stepped out into an icy wasteland. Jagged ice spires reached for the sky like frozen daggers, and a bitter wind howled through the air. The soldiers moved quickly, guiding Charlie toward a barely visible entrance carved into the side of a glacier. Inside, the temple walls were adorned with carvings, swirling patterns and ancient symbols that seemed oddly familiar. Charlie's mind flashed back to Galactic Gladiators. The same designs had been part of the game's final boss arena, except here, They felt real, intimidating, and dangerous. The soldiers marched forward with grim focus. The deeper they ventured, the more oppressive the air became. Suddenly, a sharp click echoed through the corridor. The floor shifted beneath them, and stone spears shot up from the ground. The soldiers scattered, some barely leaping away in time. "Traps!" one of the soldiers growled. "Be careful!" Charlie couldn't stop staring at the carvings. He recognized the markings, patterns that hinted at safe routes through the traps. They were identical to the visual cues in the game's hidden dungeon sequence. Charlie stepped forward and pointed toward a path that twisted between the carved designs. "Follow this way," he said. "Trust me." The soldiers hesitated, but the commander reluctantly signaled for them to follow Charlie's lead. Step by step, Charlie guided them through the maze of traps, narrowly avoiding dart launchers, shifting floors, and pressure plates disguised as stone tiles. Each moment felt like navigating a live-action puzzle, and somehow Charlie's gaming instincts kept him one step ahead. Eventually, they reached the heart of the temple. The artifact, the heart of the cosmos, sat atop a towering pedestal, encased in shimmering energy. It pulsed rhythmically, like the heartbeat of a sleeping titan. As Charlie reached for it, the air shifted. A figure materialized before him, a towering armored figure wreathed in flickering blue energy. The Lost Queen. Her presence was overwhelming, her gaze piercing as she stared into Charlie's soul. "You are not ready," the Lost Queen's voice echoed in his mind. Before Charlie could react, the Queen attacked. Blades of energy slashed through the air, forcing Charlie to stumble back. The soldiers fired their weapons, but the Lost Queen absorbed their blasts like water swallowing pebbles. Charlie scrambled for cover, panic tightening his chest. His mind raced. The Queen's attacks were fluid and precise, almost identical to her boss mechanics from the game. He remembered the trick. In the game's patched-out version, the Queen's greatest strength could be turned against her. "Cover me!" Charlie yelled. While the soldiers provided a weak distraction, Charlie dashed forward, zigzagging through her strikes. The Queen launched a devastating energy spear, exactly like the game's attack pattern. Charlie timed his move perfectly, diving beneath the spear and slamming his palm against a carved sigil on the floor, a forgotten trigger that forced her power to collapse on itself. The Lost Queen staggered back, her form flickering. "You understand my moves," she whispered. "Perhaps you are ready." Her form faded into light, and the protective barrier surrounding the artifact vanished. Charlie reached for the heart of the cosmos, its energy surging through his fingertips. The Empress stood at the center of her warship's command chamber, the heart of the cosmos cradled in her armored hands. Its core pulsed like a living star, radiating waves of power that made the air feel heavy. Charlie stood at the far end of the room, arms crossed tightly against his chest. Every instinct told him this was wrong. The Empress had claimed the artifact, but Charlie knew she wasn't seeking it for protection, she was planning something far worse. "You've done your part," the Empress said without looking at him. Her fingers danced across the surface of the artifact, tracing the swirling symbols engraved along its shell. "I no longer require your services." Charlie stiffened. He knew what that meant. The Empress didn't tolerate loose ends. He turned to leave, hoping he could quietly slip away before her guards decided to deal with him. "You're not going anywhere." Her voice cut through the silence like a blade. Charlie froze as two guards blocked the exit, plasma rifles crackling in their hands. His mind raced. He couldn't fight his way out, not against trained warriors in full armor, and running was pointless. Instead, he turned back to the Empress, forcing a smile he didn't feel. "Look," Charlie said, trying to sound casual. "I know I'm not exactly warrior material, but let's be honest, you never would have gotten that artifact without me. I deserve, I don't know, maybe a head start before you decide to vaporize me?" The Empress laughed softly, a dangerous sound. "I'm not going to kill you," she said. "But you've seen too much. You know about the heart, about my sister, about things that no human should understand." Her gaze hardened. "That makes you a liability." Charlie swallowed hard. Okay, so what? You're going to lock me in some galactic dungeon? The Empress stepped closer, the artifact humming louder with each step. You still don't understand, she said. The heart is more than a weapon, it's a gateway. With it, I can reshape entire systems. Planets, civilizations, even time itself. Her lips curled in a cold smile. The Lost Queen sealed this power away because she feared what it could do. But I'm not afraid. I will bend reality to my will, and no one will stop me. You're insane, Charlie blurted out. You can't control something that powerful. It'll destroy you. The Empress's smile vanished. I've spent my life conquering the impossible. The heart of the cosmos is mine now, and Earth will be my first demonstration. Panic shot through Charlie like ice. Earth? What? Why? His voice cracked. I won your stupid duel. I earned Earth's safety. You won nothing, the Empress growled. I allowed you to amuse me, but your planet has always been in my way. Earth's leaders refuse to submit. But when they see what the heart can do, when they watch their cities rise and fall at my command, they'll have no choice. The room seemed to tilt under Charlie's feet. The Empress wasn't just threatening Earth, she intended to rewrite reality itself. If she succeeded, the entire solar system could be torn apart. He had to stop her, but how? The Empress raised the heart of the cosmos, its light flaring brighter than ever. Charlie felt the floor vibrate beneath him as arcs of energy spiraled outward, warping the air itself. The ship's control panels flickered wildly, and the guards staggered as the room trembled. You're going to break this whole ship, Charlie shouted. You can't control it. I don't need control, the Empress sneered. I need power. Desperate, Charlie lunged forward. The guards reacted instantly, but the unstable energy made them slow. Charlie ducked past one, shoving the second aside just enough to reach the Empress. Without thinking, he grabbed the heart of the cosmos directly from her hands. The moment his fingers touched it, the world fractured. Colors bled together in impossible patterns. The floor beneath him stretched and twisted like melting glass. Sounds distorted into a deafening blur. For a terrifying moment, Charlie felt himself being pulled apart, his memories unraveling, his thoughts splintering. Time itself seemed to bend, flashing through moments that hadn't happened yet, cities in ruins, stars flickering out, entire planets shattering like glass. Then, through the chaos, a voice, calm, steady, and familiar. You must return it. The Lost Queen's voice rang inside Charlie's head. He blinked, and suddenly the chaos stilled. He found himself standing in a vast, endless void, a realm of swirling light and shadow. The Lost Queen appeared before him, her armored form glowing faintly. If the heart remains unstable, she warned, it will consume everything. You must return it to its seal. Charlie gritted his teeth. I can't, he said. The Empress isn't going to let me walk out with this thing. Then you must outthink her, the Queen replied. The heart is powerful, but power alone cannot win this battle. Use your mind, your cleverness. The same instincts that saved you before. The void blurred, and Charlie found himself back on the Empress's ship. The artifact still pulsed in his hands, but now the Empress was furious. Energy surged around her, flames of crimson light flickering from her fingertips. Give it back, she roared. Charlie knew he had seconds to act. He remembered a sequence from Galactic Gladiators, a forgotten exploit that allowed players to overload a boss's power source, forcing it to collapse on itself. It was stupid, reckless, and probably suicidal. Perfect. He slammed the heart of the cosmos against the ship's control console. Sparks exploded as the ship's power systems overloaded. The Empress lunged at him, but the sudden energy burst sent her staggering back. The heart flickered violently, its energy spiraling out of control. The Empress roared in frustration, trying to stabilize the energy. Charlie seized the moment and ran. The unstable pulses distorted gravity itself, hallways bent and twisted, walls flickered in and out of existence. Charlie stumbled blindly forward, clutching the artifact tight. He reached the ship's emergency airlock and slapped the controls. The door hissed open, revealing the frozen void of space. The heart of the cosmos trembled violently in his hands, threatening to explode. "You can't escape!" the Empress's voice thundered behind him. Charlie spun around. The Empress stood at the end of the corridor, her armor glowing with unstable energy. She reached for him, power crackling around her fingertips. "I'm not escaping," Charlie muttered. "I'm ending this." With one last breath, he hurled the heart of the cosmos into space. The artifact spun away, its pulsing light fading into the void. Seconds later, a wave of blinding energy burst outward, engulfing the Empress's ship. The power surge rippled through the vessel, shutting down systems and plunging the ship into darkness. When Charlie opened his eyes, he found himself aboard a rescue vessel. Earth's diplomatic fleet had arrived just in time to intercept the damaged warship. The Empress had survived, but her empire's fleet had retreated, weakened by the sudden collapse of their power source. Charlie sat in a quiet cafe on Earth, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind of interviews, ceremonies, and endless questions about his so-called heroic victory. News stations couldn't get enough of Earth's unlikely savior, the awkward gamer-turned-galactic warrior. Every time he turned on the TV, his face appeared with exaggerated headlines like, "The man who outsmarted a galactic empress," or "Earth's champion, from zero to hero." But Charlie didn't feel like a hero. He felt like someone who had just barely survived. The memories of that final confrontation haunted him. The heart of the cosmos was gone, lost somewhere in the endless void, but he couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't the end. The Empress had vanished after her defeat, retreating into the shadows with her empire bruised but far from broken. Charlie knew she wasn't finished. She never gave up, and if history had taught him anything, it was that she never left a debt unpaid. The cafe's door jingled as someone entered. Charlie barely glanced up before recognizing a face he hadn't expected to see again. It was Kellen, one of the Empress's former generals, a stern-faced warrior who had once threatened to crush him on sight. Now, however, Kellen looked different. His armor was gone, replaced with a worn civilian jacket. He walked directly to Charlie's table and sat down without a word. "You've been quiet," Kellen said, his voice low. "I've been trying to forget all this," Charlie muttered. "Didn't exactly sign up for a galactic war." Kellen's expression hardened. "The Empress hasn't forgotten you," he warned. "She's still watching. And she's angry." Charlie swallowed hard. He knew this moment would come, but hearing it aloud made the threat feel more real. "I figured," Charlie said. "I just hoped she'd." "I don't know, move on." Kellen shook his head. "The Empress doesn't forget humiliation. She's regrouping, stronger than before. The heart of the cosmos may be gone, but she's searching for something else now. Something worse." Charlie's mind raced. "Worse?" He didn't like the sound of that. "There's a second relic," Kellen explained. "A counterpart to the heart, the Shard of Dominion. It's rumored to amplify the mind, control thoughts, twist emotions, turn armies against their own people. If the Empress finds it, no one will resist her." Charlie set down his coffee, suddenly feeling sick. "And you're telling me this because she's still obsessed with you," Kellen said. "You humiliated her, and now she's convinced you're the only one who can stop her. She's preparing for war, but before she moves, she'll come for you." Charlie slumped back in his chair. He wasn't a soldier. He didn't know how to fight an entire empire. All he'd done was survive by improvising, guessing right when everything was going wrong. And now the galaxy expected him to do it again? "I can't win," Charlie said. "I barely survived last time." "You don't have to win," Kellen said. "You just have to stay one step ahead." That night, Charlie packed a bag and left Earth under the cover of darkness. The diplomatic fleet had arranged for a quiet departure, a shuttle that would take him off-world and into hiding until the galactic tension settled. Charlie hated the idea of running, but he knew there was no choice. If the Empress was coming for him, Earth wouldn't be safe until he was gone. The shuttle journey felt endless. Charlie stared out the window, watching distant stars streak past like falling sparks. Every now and then, his mind wandered back to the Lost Queen's warning, her whispered warning that power alone couldn't win this war. He wasn't sure what she meant, but deep down, Charlie knew that cleverness alone wouldn't save him this time. The shuttle landed on a distant space station hidden in the shadow of a dying star. It was a forgotten outpost, dark and half-abandoned, its population consisting mostly of smugglers, scavengers, and fugitives. Charlie hoped he could blend in long enough to escape the Empress's wrath. For the first few days, things were quiet. Charlie kept his head down, taking a job in a dusty repair shop to avoid drawing attention. The station's residents barely noticed him. Most were too busy scheming or surviving to care about one nervous human lurking in the background. But peace never lasted long. Late one night, as Charlie closed up the shop, a shadow flickered in the alley outside. Before he could react, a figure emerged, clad in crimson armor, her eyes burning with cold fury. The Empress. "You've made me look weak," she said, her voice low and venomous. "And now, you'll pay." Charlie bolted, sprinting down the alley as the Empress's energy bolts seared past him. He ducked through winding corridors, weaving through the chaotic maze of the station's lower levels. His heart pounded in his chest, and his mind raced for a plan. He remembered the station's old ventilation system, a forgotten network of narrow tunnels meant for maintenance crews. If he could reach the access hatch, he might stand a chance. He dashed around a corner, leaping over debris and sliding beneath a half-closed security door. The Empress followed, her steps calm and deliberate. She knew he was trapped. Charlie found the hatch and pried it open just as the Empress raised her hand to unleash a final strike. In a desperate move, Charlie grabbed a nearby canister marked "Fuel Core Unstable" and hurled it toward her. The container burst against the wall, sparks igniting a chain reaction that sent flames roaring down the corridor. Charlie dove into the hatch just as the explosion thundered behind him. He crawled blindly through the ventilation shafts, coughing and gasping for air. The heat singed his skin, but he kept moving. When he finally emerged on the other side of the station, his clothes were torn, and his face was streaked with soot. But he was alive. Days later, Charlie sat in a dimly lit room on yet another distant planet, feeling utterly exhausted. The galaxy still called him a hero, but Charlie knew the truth. He wasn't stronger or smarter than the Empress, just lucky. Sooner or later, that luck would run out. He thought about the Lost Queen's words again, that power alone couldn't win. Maybe she was right. Maybe he couldn't rely on trickery forever. If he wanted to stop the Empress for good, he needed something better. Charlie sighed heavily and stared out the window at the stars beyond. He didn't know how to win this fight, but one thing was certain: the Empress wasn't finished with him yet. The galaxy's greatest warrior was just a game developer who stumbled his way into survival. But if the Empress wanted a rematch, he'd find a way to win. Even if it killed him.